The wind howled a mournful dirge around Cactus Castle, a jagged silhouette against the perpetually bruised sky of Upper Hungary. Winter clung stubbornly to the land, its icy grip mirrored in the heart of its mistress, Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Within the castle walls, a different kind of cold reigned, the chilling dread that permeated the very stones, a testament to secrets whispered and screams silenced. The year was 1604, and Elizabeth, though still possessing a striking beauty, marred only by the faintest lines etched around her hawk-like eyes, had begun her descent into the madness that would forever stain her name. Her obsession had begun subtly, a creeping vine of vanity that wrapped itself around her soul. Time, a relentless thief, was stealing her youth, and Elizabeth, who had always prized her beauty above all else, found herself consumed by a desperate fear of aging. Mirrors, once cherished confidants, became instruments of torture, reflecting the encroaching wrinkles, the subtle sag of her skin, reminders of her impending mortality. Her husband, Ferenc Nadasti, the black hero of Hungary, was long dead, leaving her the sole ruler of their vast estates, and, more importantly, free from his often stern disapproval. His absence was both a liberation and a curse. He had kept her grounded, albeit through fear, a force that now had no equal within the castle walls. Her advisors, loyal in name only, saw an opportunity. Ilona Jo, a cunning witchwoman with eyes that glittered like shards of ice, whispered insidious suggestions into Elizabeth's ear. Ilona, privy to ancient folklore and dark arts, claimed to possess knowledge of rituals and remedies that could halt, even reverse, the aging process. These remedies, however, were not for the faint of heart. She spoke of rejuvenating elixirs, of the life force contained within young blood, a potent ingredient capable of restoring youth and vitality. Initially, Elizabeth recoiled at the suggestion, horrified by the barbarity it implied. But the fear of aging, fueled by Ilona's constant prodding and the cruel reflections in her mirrors, gnawed at her resolve. Then came Dorco, a hulking, brutish servant whose loyalty was bought with fear and promise of power. Dorco, responsible for the castle's darkest secrets, was tasked with procuring the necessary ingredients for Ilona's increasingly macabre experiments. He moved through the nearby villages like a shadow, his presence a harbinger of ill fortune. His methods were crude, often involving intimidation and outright theft. Livestock disappeared, crops withered, and a palpable sense of unease settled over the peasantry. No one dared to question the countess or her henchmen for fear of incurring their wrath. The first experiments were small, almost innocuous. Ilona prepared concoctions of herbs and animal blood, applying them to Elizabeth's skin. The results were negligible, but the countess, desperate for any sign of improvement, convinced herself that she saw a difference. This fueled Ilona's ambition, and the rituals grew bolder, more demanding. The animal blood was no longer sufficient. Ilona needed something more potent, something closer to the source of life itself. She needed virgin blood. The first victim was a young peasant girl named Anna, lured to the castle under the pretense of employment as a kitchen maid. Anna, wide-eyed and naive, dreamt of escaping the drudgery of her village life. She arrived at Kashtich Castle, filled with hope, unaware of the horrors that awaited her. Dorco, acting on Ilona's instructions, led her to a secluded chamber deep within the castle dungeons. There, Ilona and Elizabeth waited, their faces obscured by the flickering candlelight. The countess, initially hesitant, steeled herself, driven by the insatiable desire to reclaim her lost youth. The scene that followed was swift and brutal. Dorco restrained Anna, while Ilona, chanting in a guttural tongue, performed the ritual. Elizabeth, her heart pounding in her chest, watched in a detached horror as Anna's lifeblood drained into a silver basin. The countess then bathed her face and hands in the warm, crimson liquid, praying for a miracle. When she looked in the mirror, she saw no immediate transformation. Disappointment washed over her, followed by a chilling resolve. She would not be deterred. She would continue until she achieved her desired result, no matter the cost. Anna's lifeless body was disposed of discreetly, another nameless victim swallowed by the castle's dark secrets. The crimson stain on the stone floor, however, remained, a silent testament to the Countess's growing madness. The taste of blood, both literal and metaphorical, had awakened a monster within her. The disappearance of Anna sent ripples of fear through the surrounding villages. Mothers clutched their daughters closer, their eyes darting nervously towards the imposing silhouette of Countess Castle. Whispers of dark magic and unspeakable acts began to circulate, fueled by superstition and the growing unease that hung heavy in the air. The villagers, once loyal subjects of the Bathory family, started to question the Countess's rule, their faith eroded by the mounting disappearances. The local priest, Father István, a man of unwavering faith and compassion, noticed the growing despair among his flock. He listened to their whispered concerns, their fearful accounts of strange occurrences and unexplained disappearances. He initially dismissed them as mere superstition, the product of fear and ignorance. But as more girls vanished, and the stories became more consistent, a seed of doubt began to sprout in his mind. He decided to investigate, driven by his duty to protect his parishioners from harm, both physical and spiritual. He started by visiting Anna's family, offering them comfort and solace. He listened patiently as they recounted their daughter's dreams of working at the castle, their hope for a better life for her. Their grief was palpable, their faces etched with a pain that Father István could not ignore. He asked them about Anna's character, her habits, her friends. He learned that she was a kind and gentle soul, loved by all who knew her. He found it difficult to believe that she had simply run away, as some had suggested. His investigation led him to other families who had lost daughters, sisters, or nieces. He discovered a disturbing pattern. All the missing girls were young, beautiful, and virgins. The realization sent a chill down his spine. He knew enough about local folklore to understand the implications. Virgin blood, according to ancient beliefs, possessed potent magical properties, capable of warding off evil, restoring youth, and even granting immortality. He shuddered at the thought that someone might be using these beliefs for nefarious purposes. He decided to approach the Countess directly, hoping to allay his fears and put an end to the rumors. He rode to Countess Castle, his heart heavy with apprehension. The castle loomed before him, a dark and foreboding presence. He was greeted by Dorco, whose eyes held a cold, unsettling glint. Dorco informed him that the Countess was indisposed and could not receive visitors. Father István, sensing that he was being deliberately blocked, insisted on speaking to her. He argued that he had matters of great importance to discuss, matters concerning the welfare of her subjects. Dorco remained unmoved, his face an impassive mask. After a tense standoff, Dorco reluctantly agreed to relay Father István's request to the Countess. He disappeared into the castle, leaving the priest to wait in the courtyard. The courtyard was cold and damp, the air thick with oppressive silence. Father István couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that unseen eyes were observing his every move. He paced back and forth, his anxiety growing with each passing moment. Finally, Dorco returned, his face even more grim than before. He informed Father István that the Countess had agreed to see him, but only for a few minutes. He led the priest through a maze of corridors, their footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. They arrived at a large, ornate chamber, dimly lit by flickering candles. Elizabeth Bathory sat on a high-backed chair, her face pale and drawn. She greeted Father István with a curt nod, her eyes cold and distant. Father István, despite his apprehension, stood his ground. He spoke respectfully, but firmly, expressing his concerns about the growing unrest in the villages. He mentioned the disappearances, the rumors of dark magic, and the fear that gripped the hearts of her subjects. Elizabeth listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she let out a cold, dismissive laugh. She accused him of spreading baseless rumors, of inciting fear and distrust among her people. She claimed that the missing girls had simply run away, seeking a better life elsewhere. She warned Father István to be careful, to avoid spreading false accusations that could damage her reputation. She reminded him of her family's power and influence, of the consequences that could befall those who dared to question her authority. Father István, realizing that he would get nowhere with the countess, decided to end the interview. He left Cactuchy Castle with a heavy heart, his suspicions confirmed. He knew that something terrible was happening within those walls, and he vowed to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The whispers in the village had become a roar in his soul, demanding justice for the lost girls. Elizabeth, shaken by Father István's visit, grew more paranoid and secretive. She increased the security around the castle, restricting access and tightening her grip on her servants. She knew that the rumors were spreading, that people were beginning to suspect her. She had to be more careful, more discreet. But her obsession with reclaiming her youth had become an all-consuming fire, a relentless hunger that she could no longer control. Ilona, sensing Elizabeth's heightened anxiety, proposed a more drastic solution. She suggested a full immersion bath in virgin blood, a ritual that she claimed would provide a more profound and lasting effect. Elizabeth, initially hesitant, was eventually swayed by Ilona's persuasive arguments and her own desperate desire to hold back the hands of time. The thought of immersing herself completely in the life force of young virgins, of feeling their vitality coursing through her veins, was both repulsive and alluring. Dorco, tasked with procuring the necessary quantity of blood, ramped up his efforts. He no longer bothered with pretense or subtlety. He simply abducted young girls from the surrounding villages, often in broad daylight. His methods became increasingly brutal, leaving a trail of terror and despair in his wake. The villagers lived in constant fear, their lives overshadowed by the looming threat of Cactus Castle. The victims were brought to a secluded chamber deep within the castle dungeons, a room that had been specially prepared for the ritual. The walls were lined with stone, and the air was thick with the stench of blood and decay. A large, ornate bathtub, carved from a single block of marble, stood in the center of the room. It was empty now, but soon it would be filled with the lifeblood of innocent victims. Ilona prepared the ritual with meticulous care, chanting ancient incantations and arranging arcane symbols around the bathtub. She mixed various herbs and potions into the blood, believing that they would enhance its rejuvenating properties. Elizabeth, her face pale and drawn, watched in silence, her eyes fixed on the bathtub. She was both terrified and excited, her heart pounding in her chest. When everything was ready, Ilona instructed Dorco to bring in the first victim. The girl, barely a teenager, was dragged into the chamber, her eyes wide with terror. She pleaded for her life, but her cries were ignored. Dorco restrained her, while Ilona, with a swift and practiced movement, slit her throat. The blood gushed forth, filling the bathtub with a crimson tide. One by one, more victims were brought in, their blood adding to the growing pool. Elizabeth watched in detached horror as their life drained away, their bodies reduced to empty shells. She felt a pang of guilt, a fleeting moment of remorse, but it was quickly extinguished by her overwhelming desire to reclaim her youth. When the bathtub was finally full, Ilona instructed Elizabeth to disrobe and immerse herself in the blood. Elizabeth hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and stepped into the tub. The blood was warm and viscous, clinging to her skin like a shroud. She felt a strange sensation, a mixture of revulsion and exhilaration. She submerged herself completely, holding her breath as the crimson liquid enveloped her. She remained submerged for several minutes, praying for a miracle. When she finally emerged, she felt weak and dizzy. Ilona helped her out of the tub and wrapped her in a warm robe. Elizabeth looked in the mirror, expecting to see a dramatic transformation, but her reflection remained unchanged. She saw the same tired, aging face staring back at her. Disappointment washed over her, followed by a surge of anger. She turned to Ilona, her eyes blazing with fury. She accused her of lying, of deceiving her with false promises. Ilona, unfazed by Elizabeth's outburst, calmly explained that the effects of the bath would not be immediate. She claimed that it would take time for the blood to penetrate her skin and rejuvenate her cells. Elizabeth, desperate to believe her, clung to Ilona's words. She continued to perform the bloodbaths, week after week, month after month, each time hoping for a different result. But her youth remained elusive, her body continuing to age despite the countless lives that had been sacrificed. The Crimson Bath had become an addiction, a macabre ritual that consumed her life and drove her deeper into madness. The whispers in the village had turned into screams in her mind, a constant reminder of the horrors she had committed. The ever-growing number of missing girls did not go unnoticed by higher authorities. The whispers that Father István carried to the county officials grew to a shout. The Palatine of Hungary, Georgi Thurzo, received increasingly disturbing reports from the Cactus region. Initially, he dismissed them as peasant gossip, exaggerated tales fueled by superstition and resentment. But the sheer volume of complaints, coupled with the increasingly credible nature of the sources, forced him to take notice. He could no longer ignore the possibility that something truly sinister was happening at Cactus Castle. Thurzo was a pragmatic and ambitious man, driven by a sense of duty and a desire for justice. He was also a shrewd politician, aware of the Bathory family's power and influence. He knew that any investigation into the Countess's activities would be fraught with danger, potentially triggering a political crisis. But he also recognized the moral imperative to protect the innocent and bring the perpetrators of these heinous crimes to justice. He decided to launch a discreet investigation, appointing two of his most trusted notaries, Benedict Deseo and Jacob Silvasi, to gather evidence and uncover the truth. He instructed them to proceed with caution, to avoid alerting the Countess or her accomplices. He provided them with the necessary resources and authority, but also warned them of the risks involved. Their lives could be in danger if they uncovered something that Elizabeth wanted to keep hidden. Deseo and Silvasi arrived in the Cactus region disguised as traveling merchants, their true identities carefully concealed. They began by interviewing villagers, gathering testimonies, and piecing together the fragmented accounts of the missing girls. They spoke to families, friends, and neighbors, listening patiently to their stories of fear, despair, and loss. They meticulously documented their findings, noting names, dates, and specific details. Their investigation led them to Father István, who provided them with invaluable information. He shared his suspicions about the Countess, his accounts of the strange occurrences at the castle, and his concerns about the dark magic that seemed to permeate the region. He also warned them about Dorco and Ilona, identifying them as Elizabeth's key accomplices. Deseo and Silvasi, armed with this information, began to focus their attention on Cactus Castle. They observed the castle from a distance, noting the comings and goings of its inhabitants. They noticed Dorco's frequent trips to the surrounding villages, his aggressive behavior, and the palpable fear that he inspired. They also observed Ilona, her secretive movements, and her reputation as a witchwoman. They knew that they needed concrete evidence to prove the Countess's guilt. They needed to gain access to the castle, to uncover the truth hidden within its walls. But gaining access would be extremely difficult, if not impossible. The castle was heavily guarded, and Elizabeth was known for her paranoia and distrust. They decided to enlist the help of János Udvari, a local nobleman who had fallen out of favor with the Countess. Udvari had once been a close confidant of Elizabeth, but a dispute over land ownership had soured their relationship. He harbored a deep resentment towards her, and was eager to see her brought to justice. Udvari agreed to help Deseo and Gilvasi, providing them with inside information about the castle's layout, its security measures, and the Countess's daily routines. He also helped them to identify potential informants within the castle walls, servants who might be willing to risk their lives to expose the truth. With Ujvari's help, Deseo and Silvasi were able to infiltrate Kachtichi Castle. They disguised themselves as traveling craftsmen, claiming to be skilled in repairing the castle's aging infrastructure. They gained access to various parts of the castle, carefully observing their surroundings and gathering evidence. They soon discovered a hidden chamber in the dungeons, a room that reeked of blood and decay. They found a large ornate bathtub, stained with crimson. They found traces of human remains, scattered bones, and discarded clothing. The evidence was overwhelming. They had found the scene of the crimes. They also found a secret ledger, hidden beneath a loose stone in the chamber wall. The ledger contained a detailed record of the Countess's victims, their names, dates of death, and the methods used to kill them. The ledger was written in Elizabeth's own handwriting, providing irrefutable proof of her guilt. The investigation was complete. They had uncovered the truth, the horrifying reality of the Countess's crimes. Now, all that remained was to bring her to justice. The Crimson Countess would have to answer for the rivers of blood that stained her hands and her castle. Armed with overwhelming evidence, Georgi Thurzo moved swiftly. He understood the delicacy of the situation. Arresting a noblewoman of Elizabeth Bathory's stature required absolute certainty and careful execution. He amassed a small but heavily armed contingent of soldiers, loyal to him and sworn to secrecy. They approached Cactus Castle under the cover of darkness, their mission to secure the Countess and her accomplices without bloodshed, if possible. The element of surprise was crucial. Thurzo's men breached the outer defenses with minimal resistance. The guards either asleep, complicit, or simply overwhelmed. The inner courtyards were eerily silent, the only sound the crunch of snow beneath their boots. They found Dorko attempting to rally the remaining guards, but he was quickly subdued, his brutish strength no match for the disciplined soldiers. The Countess was found in her chambers, seemingly unfazed by the commotion. She was surrounded by her maids, attending to her toilette. Elizabeth, upon seeing Thurzo, demanded to know the meaning of this intrusion. She invoked her family name, her noble birthright, and threatened dire consequences for any disrespect. Thurzo, however, remained unmoved. He presented her with the evidence, gathered by Deseo and Silvasi, the ledger detailing her crimes, the testimonies of the villagers, and the horrifying discoveries in the castle dungeons. Elizabeth, realizing that she had been exposed, flew into a rage. She denied the accusations, claiming that they were fabrications, the work of jealous rivals seeking to undermine her power. She accused Thurzo of treason, of conspiring against her and her family. But her words rang hollow, her denials unconvincing. The weight of evidence was simply too great to ignore. Thurzo ordered the arrest of Elizabeth Bathory and her accomplices. Dorko and Ilona Jo were apprehended without incident. They offered no resistance, their faces etched with fear and resignation. They knew that their time had come, that their crimes had finally caught up with them. The other servants, terrified and eager to distance themselves from the Countess, readily cooperated with Thurzo's men. The subsequent trial was a sensation, a scandal that rocked the Hungarian aristocracy. The evidence presented by Deseo and Silvasi was damning, leaving no room for doubt about Elizabeth's guilt. The testimonies of the villagers, the details of the missing girls, and the gruesome discoveries in the castle dungeons painted a horrifying picture of cruelty and depravity. Dorko and Ilona, under intense questioning, confessed to their roles in the crimes, implicating Elizabeth as the mastermind behind the atrocities. The court found Elizabeth Bathory guilty of the torture and murder of hundreds of young girls. Her accomplices, Dorko and Ilona, were sentenced to death. They were publicly executed, their bodies burned at the stake, as a warning to others who might be tempted to follow in their footsteps. But Elizabeth Bathory, due to her noble birth and powerful family connections, was spared the death penalty. Instead, she was sentenced to life imprisonment. She was walled up in a small room within Countess Castle, with only a small slit for food and water. She remained there for 4 years, isolated and alone, haunted by the ghosts of her victims. She died in 1614, her body ravaged by disease and despair. Countess Castle, once a symbol of power and prestige, became a place of infamy, a testament to the depths of human depravity. The castle was abandoned, left to crumble and decay. The villagers shunned the place, believing it to be cursed. The legend of Elizabeth Bathory, the Crimson Countess, grew over time, embellished with tales of her insatiable thirst for blood and her alleged pact with the devil. Some say that her ghost still roams the castle ruins, searching for the youth she so desperately craved. Others claim that the bloodstains on the dungeon walls can still be seen, a permanent reminder of the horrors that transpired within those walls. The story of Elizabeth Bathory has become a cautionary tale, a chilling reminder of the dangers of vanity, obsession, and the corrupting influence of power. She is remembered not as a noblewoman, but as a monster, the bloodiest woman in history, her name forever synonymous with torture, murder, and the eternal quest for youth. Her real crime was not simply the taking of lives, but the destruction of innocence, the shattering of dreams, and the staining of a nation's history with an indelible mark of crimson, mark of crimson, mark of crimson.